Welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories this hour. Israel's defense minister approves an expansion into Gaza City, calling up 60,000 reservists amid reports of explosions in Khan Yunis. Hostage families condemn the move, saying it ignores a Hamas-backed ceasefire and calling it a stab in the heart. The Kremlin downplays speculation of an imminent meeting between Presidents Putin and Zelensky, even as Donald Trump presses for direct talks to end the war. Trump, after hosting European leaders and Zelensky in Washington, admits the conflict is tough to resolve and warns Putin may not want a deal. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is in Moscow to co-chair the 26th session of the India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific and Technological and Cultural Cooperation. The three-day visit focuses on deepening bilateral ties and expanding strategic partnerships. Ukraine's Prime Minister says 14 people, among them a family with 3 children, were wounded in an overnight Russian drone strike on the northern Sumy region. Prosecutors say 15 drones hit Orthoria area as US President Donald Trump intensifies efforts to negotiate an end to the war. Russia says it will continue supplying oil to India at current levels through a special mechanism, despite global energy pressures. A Russian embassy official confirms President Putin will travel to New Delhi to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi before the end of the year. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says Tehran cannot fully sever cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog even after Parliament curbed inspections following June strikes on its nuclear facilities. He says inspectors must remain involved despite new laws requiring high-level security approval for future visits. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accuses Australia's Anthony Albanese of betraying Israel and abandoning the Jewish community, calling him a weak politician. The diplomatic rift deepens after Canberra moves to recognise a Palestinian state. Human Rights Watch says Rwanda-backed M23 rebels killed at least 140 people in eastern Congo in July, warning the true toll may exceed 300. The report highlights escalating violence in Rutshuru territory, even as US and Qatar-backed peace talks continue. Now this hour we start in the Middle East, where after Israel Defense Minister Israel Katz approved a plan to seize Gaza City and authorized the call-up of 60,000 reservists, Hamas's armed wing, the Qassam Brigades, has claimed responsibility for a raid on a newly established Israeli military position southeast of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. In a statement, the group said its fighters engaged Israeli troops at close range using light weapons and grenades and claimed a sniper fatally wounded one of the commanders of a Merkava 4 tank. It also said that a suicide bomber detonated explosives among Israeli forces as reinforcements arrived. According to the Qassam Brigades, the attack involved mortar fire, anti-tank shells and explosives and lasted several hours before its fighters withdrew. According to reports, the group did not specify how many Israeli soldiers were killed or wounded. We're now joined by Yossi Kapawasa. He is an Israeli intelligence and security expert, and he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Yossi, for joining us. If you can, we currently constantly get influxes of information of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Hamas's military capabilities is also currently yet left unspoken about. Can you give us a synopsis of how capable Hamas currently is, given after this attack has just happened?
Good morning. Hamas is still capable of carrying out such attacks, and the report that Hamas issued has a grain of truth. They did carry out the attack. What happened was that they lost something like 10 of their terrorists, and there was one Israeli soldier that was severely injured as well. And they have the capability, they launch attacks almost on a daily basis, and the fact that they are able to do so is just because we allow the humanitarian aid go in, and they confiscate it and steal it, and then sell it in very high prices to the population, and that enables them to get the money to buy weapons and to produce weapons, and that's what we to recruit more terrorists to their ranks, and that's the reality we are living, and that's the reality we are trying to change with the attempt to take over the Gaza City and remove Hamas from power in Gaza.
Yossi, there has been widespread criticism for this new plan to overtake Gaza City, both internationally and domestically. We've obviously seen protests across Israel, thousands and thousands of people walking the streets in protest of this, obviously for the safety of the hostages, but also the safety of the IDF going into Gaza City, a much more built-up area where Hamas can hide. Is Netanyahu making the right decision in launching this new offensive?
Well, I think the most important thing that Netanyahu does is keep all the options open. He still didn't close the door for a partial deal. Now we see that Hamas has come back with a more flexible position on the issue of a partial deal. And the Israeli response to that has not been given yet. And I guess it's going to be negative or yes, but because the Hamas didn't go far enough in order to meet us on the issue of partial deal. He definitely is ready to have a full deal that would release all the hostages and see readiness on behalf of Hamas to disarm themselves and hand the control of Gaza to somebody else. And if those two options are not going to materialize, we are moving forward in the third option of taking over Gaza City by force and removing Hamas from power by force. So all the options are still on the table. We are making progress on all of them. We are discussing the partial deal, and Israeli responses were expected by the end of the week. And we are preparing also to the other two options. The best option from an Israeli point of view is if the pressure, the military pressure, the readiness to take steps in order to remove Hamas from power by force is going to convince Hamas to go for a comprehensive deal, full deal that would see the release of all the hostages and Hamas leaving power and delivering it to somebody else. That would be the best, and this would avoid the need to go to a military operation. But if this is not going to work and the partial deal is not going to be satisfactory, we have to be prepared also to the third option, and that's why we call the reservists. And that's why the more we seem to be, in the eyes of Hamas, serious about carrying out the third option, the military operation, the better the chances are that we shall end up with either option A or option B.
Yossi, finally to the diplomatic front. We've seen Benjamin Netanyahu today come out and seriously condemn Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in Australia's plan to recognise a Palestinian state. We've just had a look at the Reuters news agency, and it says that even most Americans believe that countries should recognise a Palestinian state. This poll comes from Reuters Ipsos, which says 58% of Americans believe every country in the United Nations should recognise Palestine as a nation. Benjamin Netanyahu has strong words for those that do so. Is Israel at risk currently of losing all its Western fringe, which it values so dearly, but not just right now, but also in the future?
Well, those governments of the Western countries that recognize or intend to recognize the Palestinian state, they were in favor of doing that for a long time. These were Albanese in Australia, for example, and Macron were in favor of this idea for a very long time, even before the war. But doing it now is just giving a prize, a reward to terrorism, a reward to Hamas. Hamas says it clearly. It says this is an outcome of the 7th of October attack. It's beyond my understanding what leads them to do this move just now. the fact that they want to see a Palestinian state, and which is a mistake by itself, because they don't put any conditions for that, any real conditions. A Palestinian state can be established only if the Palestinians change the narrative and are ready to accept Israel as a Jewish state. If they're not ready to do that, if they consider a Palestinian state as a launching pad for carrying out terror attacks against Israel and attacking Israel so that Israel will cease to exist, what is the logic behind recognizing such a state? The Palestinians had a kind of a state in Gaza. All they did was using it in order to launch attacks against Israel, as we saw eventually on the 7th of October. This lacks any logic, and that's why most Israelis, not 58%, but 90% of Israelis are totally frustrated with this position. It's not that we're losing our friends, they are still our friends, but they become more and more problematic friends. And as we say, with friends like this, who needs enemies?
Yossi, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you on, and thank you for taking the time. We now move over to Europe for our next story, where tensions escalate in Russia and Ukraine as Russia steps up its attacks. The Russian Defense Ministry claims new territorial gains in the east, reporting the capture of Novoherkiva, Pankiva, Surohetsk. Meanwhile, Russia's assault on Ukraine's northern Sumy region overnight left at least 14 people injured, including 3 young children. Ukraine's emergency services are working tirelessly to rescue civilians from the rubble after Russian drone strikes hit homes, cars and buildings. In addition, the southern region of Odessa faces a massive drone strike on its energy infrastructure, causing fires and significant damage to port facilities. We're now joined by Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst and he joins us live from Taipei, Taiwan. Ross, thank you for taking the time to talk to us as always. Ross, your thoughts on the escalating tensions and the escalating hostilities in Ukraine, in the east, while we reel from a charm offensive by Zelensky and European leaders in the White House and the possibility of a peace deal growing ever closer.
As myself and other guests here on NewsX have discussed in recent days and weeks, part of this is about posturing. It's about changing facts on the ground in advance of a potential ceasefire or a long-term peace agreement. So it's about getting an advantage, keeping in mind that there have to be some negotiation. Again, assuming that there is a deal to be had. Now, assuming that there is a deal to be had, there's going to be a lot of back and forth negotiation about where that ceasefire line will be. And we know that the advantage is with the Russian military. It's incremental. They don't make huge advances every day or every week, but the advantage is with the Russian military at the moment on the ground. So, of course, they want to adjust those facts on the ground to the best extent possible, heading into any negotiation about where a ceasefire line would be. The other factor here is it's also about Russia trying to wear down public opposition in Ukraine to reaching a deal. President Zelensky has been very resistant to reaching a deal that involves giving up any territory, but he does have pressure from a public that's very weary of war. There's the well-reported issue about challenges Ukraine has for filling its ranks. They're simply running out of men to report for military duty. That's no secret. So Russia's actions at this time are also about wearing down the public support in Ukraine for continuing to fight Russia. Or to describe that differently, it's about increasing public support in Ukraine to reach some kind of a ceasefire arrangement.
Ross, we got that breakthrough that the United States may provide air support to back a Ukraine peace deal in a possible security guarantee. How important would this be for Ukraine?
It would just be part of the equation. Ukraine is looking for a lot of stuff as part of any kind of ceasefire or long-term peace agreement. One of that, apparently, from all the public reporting, is that there'd have to be troops on the ground, and the United States is not going to provide that. So it would have to come from the major European military powers like France and the UK, maybe Germany, although there might be public resistance in Germany to sending troops for historical reasons, which I think the audience is very familiar with. But there would be an element of some kind of no-fly zone. Again, the Europeans would probably be expected to take the lead on that, but it's very possible that President Trump could say that the U.S. would contribute to air cover, contribute to a kind of no-fly zone, which would apply to both sides. It would apply to Russia and Ukraine as well. But again, I could see President Trump agreeing to that because he might see it as less risky to American personnel than if the U.S. had troops on the ground.
Yes, of course, Ross, and let's finish this off with a bit of diplomacy. Your thoughts on President Trump's actions in contrast between the Russian president meeting and also the last-minute scrambling, but eventually positive meeting of Zelensky and the European leaders?
To be fair to President Trump, he's willing to meet with both sides in the interest of some kind of ceasefire, which he talked about before the meeting with Putin, and now he's more focused on a potential long-term peace agreement. So it's easy to criticize President Trump for meeting with Putin, who did launch this invasion. He's wanted for war crimes. So it's easy to say, how could you meet with this kind of person? But again, to be fair to President Trump, he seems to be engaged at the moment with both sides in the interest of reaching a peace agreement.
Ross, thank you. You are staying with us to discuss further updates. Let's now move on. We stay in the European continent where Polish authorities are investigating an explosion in a cornfield in the village of Usyny near the border with Ukraine. Police initially reported an unidentified object falling in the area, but the Polish army now says debris found at the site may belong to an old propeller engine. The blast shattered windows in nearby homes but caused no injuries. Burnt metal and plastic fragments were recovered, according to the state news agency PAP. Military officials said radar analysis showed no violation of Polish airspace from either Ukraine or Belarus on the night of the incident. Still, Defense Minister Władysław Kosin-Kamyk says all scenarios remain on the table, including drones, sabotage and even hybrid provocations from Russia. Let's listen in to what the local police and residents had to say.
Dzisiaj po godzinie 2 w nocy dyżurny naszej jednostki otrzymał informację z treści, której wynikało, że w okolicach miejscowości Osiny doszło do wybuchu, doszło do eksplozji, widoczny był błysk. Zlokalizowaliśmy to miejsce, o którym nas poinformowano. Znaleźliśmy w tym miejscu liczne fragmenty nadpalone plastikowe, metalowe. Aktualnie jest to miejsce zabezpieczone, wykonujemy specjalistyczne czynności. Dla nas najważniejsze jest, że pomimo tego, że w pobliskich domach doszło do wybicia, do wypadnięcia szyb, nikomu nic się nie stało. Rozpatrujemy każdą ewentualność, tak jak powiedziałem, zabezpieczyliśmy liczne metalowe i plastikowe elementy, sprawdzamy, od czego te elementy mogą pochodzić.
Jesteśmy na polu niedaleko wybuchu, gdzie w nocy strasznie mocno walnęło. Potem mocno śmierdziało, bo przy otwartych oknach śpię. Śmierdziało siarką, śmierdziało jak po wybuchu jakiegoś środka wybuchowego.
W pokoju w nocy siedziałem mniej więcej tak może północ była. Słyszałem, że coś po prostu walnęło. Myślałem może, że to okno mi jakoś chlapnęło. Miałem okno otwarte, bo teraz też okno cały czas ma otwarte. No ale patrzę, no okno jest zamknięte, no to myślę sobie co, ktoś może wypadek, miał coś wybuchło, no ale skoro ktoś miał wypadek, no to raczej by całym domem nie zatrzęsło, bo jak wybuchło, to aż po prostu cały dom się zatrząsł.
Ross, a strange incident there. However, what more can you tell us about Poland's positioning and the hostilities that it might possibly face in the future? Is it warranted to signal such worries?
One thing we know from Polish politics over the past few years is the right and the left have really united in supporting stronger defense, more spending on national defense, closer military cooperation with the United States, and supporting Ukraine. So even though there's a new President Noraki, who's right of center, his dislike for Prime Minister Tusk, who's left of center, is well known. They have vastly different views on Poland's role in Europe and specifically with the European Union. But when it comes to national defense, Poland's politicians are very united. And any kind of threat, and it remains to be seen if this object and the explosion could be pinned on Russia, but any perceived military movement by Russia that threatens Poland's national security will probably see a very unified response across what is a very large political divide in Poland.
Ross, as always, pleasure having you on the program. Thank you very much for taking the time. We now move over to North America for our next story, where Texas Democrats returned to the state capitol on the night of August the 19th in a show of solidarity with Representative Nicole Collier, who defied Republican leadership by refusing a police escort from the building. Collier spent the night on the House floor protesting GOP orders for law enforcement to monitor Democratic lawmakers. The dispute stems from a heated battle over redistricting, which is part of a broader effort encouraged by President Donald Trump to secure Republican control of the U.S. House in 2026. Democrats had previously fled the state for 2 weeks, denying a quorum and stalling the Republican redistricting vote. Now back under Capitol Police surveillance, tensions remain high. Now let's listen to what a Texas district representative had to say on the issue.
Why would we be considered a flight risk if we walked in of our own volition? We walked in. We are not running from anything. We have not been running from anything this entire time. So I want to be clear that this is a blatant violation of our freedoms as Texans, as Americans, and of duly elected officials. I stand shoulder to shoulder with Representative Nicole Collier and all of my colleagues here because we are being subjected to extreme and unnecessary measures. Taxpayer dollars should not be wasted following elected officials around like criminals.
We're now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao, who's a fellow at the Hudson Institute, and he joins us live from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao, as always, pleasure to talk to you. In the ever-growing partisan world of US politics, what more can you tell us about this situation going on in Texas, where Texas Democrats returned to the state capitol in solidarity with a fellow Democrat who refused a police escort from the building along political lines?
This is a symbolic example of the gerrymander-style election area. Because in 19th century, Governor Gary redistrict the election area to increase their seat. But the shape looks like the monster salamander, so that's why the people start to call this is gerrymander. And the gerrymander style is indeed legal. Gerrymander style redistricting the election area is legal indeed. But to win the next midterm election next year, now the Republicans want to redistrict, so choose the gerrymander style to reshape the election area to increase their seat, because win-win-win if increased, maybe their seat will be increased. So, but the view from the Democrats, because they are minority, so that's why the one kind of the unexpected method they choose, escape to the other state and do not join the decision making. That is the solution to prevent the redistricting that they have chosen in the past. So this, if this has allowed, many other states will follow the same thing. That is a concerning point. Because gerrymander itself is legal, and most Republican Democrats has done in the past. So that is common. But at the same time, as a new method, escaping is a new one because not enough number in the parliament cannot decide anything. So that's why the redistricting will not happen. Now, that is logic that they have done. So that's why if this has arose, in the other states, same thing could happen. That is a matter of concern. So now all the police is watching their move, do not escape other states. That is maybe methods they choose. But anyway, this is a concerning point of this incident.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, do stay with us as we discuss further updates. We now move over where Germany and Indonesia are moving to strengthen trade and investment ties ahead of the Indonesia-EU SEPA Pact. This comes after talks in Jakarta, where Indonesian Foreign Minister Sugiarto said that bilateral trade reached over $6 billion last year, with German investments totaling $343 million. Let's listen in to what he further added on the issue.
Kami sama-sama berharap implementasi Indonesia-EU CEPA yang ditargetkan selesai pada 2026 akan semakin memperluas peluang kerjasama khususnya di bidang ekonomi antara kedua negara, meningkatkan perdagangan dan investasi, dan saya juga menyampaikan kesediaan dan keterbukaan Indonesia untuk meningkatkan investasi, untuk mengundang Jerman meningkatkan investasi bersama-sama dengan dan antara.
Meanwhile, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul reaffirmed Berlin's commitment and noted that the SEPA deal is on track, urging progress as early as next month, even as the agreement is formally targeted at completion in 2026. Let's now listen to what he said a bit more on the deal.
Für deutsche und indonesische Unternehmen bietet es große Chancen der Zusammenarbeit, zum Beispiel bei erneuerbaren Energien. Schon jetzt kooperieren Deutschland und Indonesien bei der Energiewende. Wir unterstützen Indonesien unter anderem zusammen mit Japan, Sie haben das erwähnt, im Just Energy Transition Partnership Programm, JETTP, bei der beschleunigten und sozial gerechten Energiewende. Deutschland trägt dazu allein 1,6 Milliarden Euro.
The visit comes as Germany steps up its engagement in Asia following Wadephul's talks in Tokyo earlier this week. We're once again joined by Dr. Nagao. Could you tell us a bit about European and specifically German influence in Asia and how important, if at all, it is to the region?
German influence in Europe is very big, but German influence in Asia is limited. But now they try to improve it. Indeed, European focusing on Indo-Pacific because Indo-Pacific is rising. In case of Indonesia, they will be the number 5 of the GDP. They will be the expert.
Okay.
Why?
I believe we're having some technical issues there with Dr. Nagao. There's some network issues. Apologies, Dr. Nagao. Hopefully we get you on once again soon. We now move over to Europe for our next story, where Portugal's Civil Protection Service says a man was killed while helping fight wildfires in the north, raising the national death toll blazes to 3. The 65-year-old victim, employed by a private company assisting in Mirandela, died in an accident involving construction equipment used to contain the flames. Authorities say about 15 others were injured while battling fires near the central city of Sabugal, one of them critically. 2 water bombing planes sent by Sweden through the EU Civil Protection Agency joined the fight there. More than 2,600 firefighters and 20 aircraft remain deployed across Portugal, where 4 large blazes were still active. Meanwhile, neighbouring Spain has reported 4 deaths and record losses of nearly 373,000 hectares this year. In Portugal, over 261,000 hectares are burnt, almost double last year's figure. Officials warn that drought and recurring heat waves intensified by climate change continue to fuel Europe's wildfire crisis. Okay, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.